Wastage and add-backs in divorce. Big changes have happened since June 10th, 2025 in Australia, and now there's an actual case that has been reported on it. So today, if your ex has been spending all the money, running the business into the ground, gambling or wasting money while you've been scrimping and saving, today's episode is going to be perfect for you. Welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura. Hello, everyone.
Now, today we're pretty much going to go through what does it mean, how do you tell your lawyer, how do you prove it, how to bring it up in mediation, what are the implications for you listening right now, what are the things you should be focusing on, and we're going to talk about this recent case as well.
Yeah.
So let's get to the jingle and let's get started.
Hello, I'm Laura, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
Just a reminder, though, that this is an educational podcast where we discuss topics about divorce. This is not legal advice. Mum is not your lawyer. I am not a lawyer. So we are here just to discuss it and give you some education so that you can go and talk to your own lawyer about this situation. So, Mum, this issue of wastage, it's been around, add-backs, it's been around for a while. What does it mean? What is wastage and add-backs?
Okay, you're right. It's been around since the very early 90s. And wastage is one thing. Wastage is a person deliberately or carelessly reducing the property pool by stupid actions. Okay, by stupid actions. So that's what wastage is. You might, like you say, it might be a business into the ground, although that's very hard to prove that it was good and now it's not. But things like taking money out of their super or using the money out of the bank, that sort of thing. And there's wastage during the marriage and wastage post or after separation. And they really have two different sorts of connotations.
And what's add-backs?
Add-backs, when you work out what everything's been spent, either on legal fees or whatever money they've wasted, when you come to a dollar value, up until the 23rd of July, everyone was just putting that number in the balance sheet. Wastage by the husband, wastage by the wife since such and such.
And so what? They're not doing that now?
No.
Change? So what's the change? So wastage is basically they spend their money on stupid stuff and the other person's like, come on, this is ridiculous. It would have been fair to have that in the property pool. That's not fair. Like you said, whether they've gone on extravagant holidays to Africa, first-class trips, they've gambled it away or whatever, they've wasted it. And now, what's different?
What's the
change?
So in the old way of doing things, like the old Weir case and Townsend case, you would simply work out what that cost, what money's missing, and add it back in to the property pool, and then that's the first bit off their share.
Right.
But now the court says, no, you can't add it into the property pool. The change is, firstly, the law changed in June, and it said that from now on, wastage can be taken into account as one of the factors when the court works out property settlement, and it's been during the marriage and post-separation. But the full court now, in applying that legislation, so within a month and a bit, okay, so on the 23rd of July, a full court bench handed down their decision, and they said, look, essentially, I've read the case, they've said, look, we've tried to say that Weir and Townsend really shouldn't be applied. It shouldn't be just add the money back and then pretend they've already had it. They said, we've tried to put down decisions the other way, but the judiciary and the lawyers have just continued to add it back as a dollar figure. So this is their slam dunk on us now. And they say, so now it's no longer good law, or as one commentator said, they're passé. Now, if the court says you adjust the property that's still around, right, and adjust that between you both to take into account the wastage that they have done. So it really is going to be a percentage probably rather than a dollar.
Right. So instead of putting, okay, well, they sold their car for $1 to their mum, but the car was worth $100,000. So I'm going to put 100,000 back on the ledger and they've already got that.
Yes.
Now they're saying it's got to be a percentage of the property pool.
And you see where the problem might happen is if your property pool is only 200,000, say, and they've wasted 100,000, then I suppose you'd be asking the court
for an extra.
Yeah, to have some more. Well, it may work out to be the same. So if you've got a property pool of 300,000, we're going here again, I guess. He sold it to his mum for $1, right? And there's still $200,000 left, but that car no longer belongs to the parties. Then you would be asking the court to give you 150,000 for a 50%. That would be a 50% share of what the pool might have otherwise been. Okay.
Right.
So you're asking for 75% of what remains. It sounds like semantics, but it is, the court's just trying to bring us all in line with the new legislation. And wastage used to be the exception rather than the rule. Now it's common.
So basically they're saying add backs are gone.
Yes.
Now it's a percentage of the property pool from their wastage. And we're going to get into the case a little bit later. And we're also going to have some listener questions we're going to start asking you just to add it all in there. But who does this apply to?
Anyone who hasn't had their final hearing yet.
Right. Okay.
And because it's a full court decision, it's binding on all of the judges, individual judges and the registrars and everybody. So it's a massive chain. And a bit of clarity, I think, that we needed. You can see in our example with the 300,000, if the court had added that 100,000 back in and divided the property, say 50-50, she would still get 150 and he'd get 50 plus the car, that he wasted. So by saying the car's gone, we can only divide the current property but give her, say, 75%. She's no worse off, but it's the process that's going to be different and that's impacted by the change to the law.
Okay. You also talked about before and after. So during the marriage wastage and after the marriage wastage, after separation. What's the difference? Is it treated the same?
No, not usually. So it's tricky, right? So a lot of people, I think we've had listeners say this to us as well, there's been gambling during the relationship and one person maybe didn't have any idea that the other person was gambling. Well, that could be wastage in the marriage and gets treated probably the same as a post-separation wastage unless they can prove they've got a psychological problem and then that can't help it. But generally, money spent during the marriage is assumed to have been with the tacit approval of the other parent. So say I had a case many years ago where the husband bought an ostrich farm or set up an ostrich farm and he was definitely off on a frolic of his own and the wife wanted nothing to do with it. She documented that. And in today's cases, today's way of looking at things, they might say, look, that was his own choice to do that during the marriage and it's going to affect the percentages, that wastage during the marriage. He'll get a lesser percent. But usually the court is more inclined, and the cases normally support, are finding that you both knew about it, whether it's drugs or gambling or just blowing your money on cars.
So wastage during the marriage, the court kind of just goes, well, you were kind of there. It's kind of that you were agreeing to it by not leaving them, I guess. Right. Where wastage, unless it's gambling.
Yeah, unless it's a hidden thing.
Right. So, but then after the marriage is over, after the de facto relationship's over, then it is treated differently.
Yes. Well, you're less likely to find the court saying, well, you agreed to that anyway, so it's not really wastage. See?
Right.
You're less likely to have that argument. So the court talks about swings and roundabouts in marriage. And during that time that you are together, de facto or married, you have, things that go up, things go down. You might be into skiing and waste a lot of money on that, but you can't go back after you've separated and have a big whinge about what might have been, because that was what happened during the marriage. The court would never be free of cases if they didn't say that's during the marriage.
What happens then if you separate and you're saving all your money and you're trying your hardest? Because I think this is different. You're desperate. You're desperate to save up enough money maybe to pay for a kid's class for something, or I don't know,
Or a buffer.
medical expenses, anything, because the cost of living at the moment is a bit stressful. So they're saving and saving, but their ex is
spending,
going on holidays and all of that sort of stuff. And then you have to tell them in your mediation or in your court trial exactly how much money's in your bank.
Yes.
And how much money's in their bank. And their bank says $0. And your bank says 30,000. You've saved so much money because you've been busting your chops and you've been separated for 2-3 years. You've got 30,000, they've got $0. And in the past, we've heard people's heart drop.
Yes.
When basically 15,000 of that gets sent to their ex.
It can.
After they've just had the best holidays in the world while that person's been scrooping and saving. Is that the same now?
No, thankfully. Thankfully, that's changed.
Okay.
Of course, and my heart used to break when you would see people, like you said, they are frightened. They've just separated from a marriage. They've got the kids to be responsible for, save, and then give it to whoever. So that's a good thing about the change, okay? And you can say that because the court is looking also at post-separation contributions, okay? And they're looking at if you've got money saved, that's your current and future circumstances, the court, I think, will be less inclined to add that into the property pool total, or at least put it into a separate pool. But we're waiting for some judgment on high to come down, a bit like this one, Shinohara, our case.
Yes. Yeah. So don't quote us and don't bank on that.
No.
Okay, but we'll get to that in a minute, Mum. I'm just going to touch on some other ways of wastage. So businesses.
That's hard. I haven't seen a business that suddenly flourished after separation in all my 30-odd years. Generally, they go off or they go bad or someone pretends they're going bad. Sometimes the people operated a business very well as a couple, but when one person pulls out of the business because of separation, the other person flounders and the business drops in value. Sometimes it is siphoning stuff off and making silly decisions. So businesses are hard. My tip for you, if you want to show the court the impact of a business loss, if you think you can show that it was deliberate rather than someone heartbroken trying to continue the business, then your valuations should be as at the date of separation of the business and as at today's date. And ask the valuer to identify where the expenses have changed. And so you'll be able to look down. And often when I see a business that's suddenly in trouble with tax and whatever, and you look down and there's been a fortune spent on overseas holidays or conferences and things, or their superannuation, they've started to put a lot in the superannuation. There's a lot of wiggle room in your own business. And so you need to have a look at that.
And gambling, we've already touched on that. That's during the marriage and after. Yeah. If there's gambling going on, that can be considered wasted.
Unless they've won. If they've won, then that goes into the property pool.
Well, if you are a gambler and you're going through divorce, it doesn't seem like it pays either way to do it, does it? No, okay, so gambling is definitely added as wastage. The trick there, though, I guess...
definitely added as wastage? If it's secret? If it's not part of their way of life, if you're a couple who goes down to the casino every weekend, then it's not wastage.
Right.
It usually have to have some character of secrecy. And the court is at pains to say that every case is different and the justice of the case takes different things into account.
What about drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, again, if the person was drinking while you were together, then she's spending money on alcohol. Even if you don't drink.
And that's not wastage because you kind of already knew about it.
It's like someone eats a lot of chocolate biscuits and the other one doesn't. You don't add that back in the grocery bill.
So screwed.
And
I eat so many chocolate biscuits.
Marshmallows for me.
Yeah.
So that you don't add that back. With drugs, again, unless it was a really secretive thing, the court won't add that back, I don't think. Often when there's drugs taking, it can very often be both of you at some stage before one of you grew up a bit and thought, no, I've got responsibilities here. To venture over into another area for drugs and alcohol, we can look at that in terms of contributions, that whatever it was that made your contributions so much harder if you had an adult partner most of the time. and you were doing all the heavy lifting. But that's a talk for another day.
Okay, so you're saying with drugs and alcohol, sometimes it's not considered wastage if it's not secret or you knew about it all the time. But if it made you and your living and everything you had to do harder, then that's a larger contribution on your behalf. If they were just drunk on the couch every day and you're running around taking the kids to school and doing the homework and the groceries and also working, then you probably made a much larger contribution. So your percentage of the property pool would be higher potentially.
Yeah, the test is, did their, whatever it was, behaviour or habit or family violence or coercive control, whatever it was, did that make your contribution more arduous, the court says? In other words, harder than if you were going home to someone who was a normal person who would help. Right, so I think we've been talking about gambling during the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Post-separation gambling is different, okay? So if they've been taking money out of joint funds to gamble or out of their superannuation to gamble, then that really is behaviour that should be taken into account as wastage. If they're doing it out of their post-separation salary, then it's not wastage.
Okay. So we're about to talk about how to prove it, how to tell your lawyer, and how to bring it up in mediation and the case. But I just want to ask these two listener questions. Okay. Obviously, I've changed a lot of the details, so you won't know this person. But this person's ex was addicted to gambling and alcohol. They found out they were losing the house, and they managed to get all the bank statements that were previously hidden and can prove part of a very large loss, like a significant loss. They're basically now in this massive hole of mortgage.
Yeah.
So when it comes to wastage, I guess they were asking if they can add it back into the property pool, and we've just discussed that the add backs are gone.
Yep.
So how much evidence do they need? What kind of thing can that person do
to get that
with the new changes
account?
to get taken into account?
I think if I was acting for her, as her lawyer, I wouldn't try to prove addiction on the other person because that's a medical condition. Same, so gambling and drugs. I wouldn't try to prove addiction, but I would establish through the bank statements for the gambling that it was a problem throughout the relationship. In the affidavit that you do, I would be very graphic. Tell the story of how you found out, how you felt that day when you got either a phone call or you opened a letter. Oh, my God, I'm getting palpitations just thinking about it. And how I imagine your whole world just sank when you found out what was going on. Paint that picture for the court and then set out your current circumstances. You might have gone from living in a nice home to now you're renting a flat or you're back at your mum's or something, and also what you're facing in the future, because the court is now looking at current and future circumstances, and they're particularly keen to help. One of the sections of the legislation is to help a person keep a roof over the kids' heads. So if she's got the kids with her, then she needs to paint that picture for the court as well. How much does she need to get herself established? Has she tried to get a loan? What would she need as a deposit to be able to borrow? Those sorts of things. I think you almost need to lead the judge on your journey and then show there's a glimmer of hope, if there is. But that it depends on this particular decision being made. And it might be that you get 100% of the assets, or you might get 90% of the assets, or that you don't have to have any super, you can take all of your entitlement in cash. So that's where I would make that live for the judge. Because when you told me that story, that really affected me. And so I think if a judge got the message of how that felt, they would really understand the depth of wastage and probably betrayal.
And that wouldn't be an add back on the spreadsheet. It would be a percentage of the property
Yes, that's
pool.
right. It will impact on what percentage of the property pool you get. You'd need to add it all up if you can and to make it live. Looking at these statements, I've added up $90,000 wasted on gambling, whatever. But the court will never use that $90,000 to put in the spreadsheet. But they might say, well, the whole property pool is only $290,000. So that's a big chunk.
So it does depend on what the property pool is in total.
That's right.
Like if it's a $10 million property pool,
and
then it would be a different percentage.
Yeah, if 90%, if $90,000 was spent on gambling of a $10 million property pool, I'd be surprised if there was an adjustment. There might be, but it might not be much.
But if it's a small property pool and that much was spent, then the adjustment might be quite significant.
Absolutely. And if the amount you're getting is not going to be enough for getting a new house, then or getting somewhere to live, you need to let the court know that there's this figure I need so I can move on with the kids.
Okay. All right. One more listener question. What happens if they're earning an incredibly high income, but they're spending all of it on just themselves? It's not on the mortgages or anything like that, and just living extravagant dinners, holidays, vehicles. Is that considered wastage even though it's his own pay?
No. Wastage is predominantly off money that existed at the time of separation or an asset that existed at the time of separation. And the case law is also trying to look at people's current and future circumstances. And he's entitled to blow all the money. But if that's meant you've had to put money in to keep things ticking along, like school fees and stuff like that, then that might ultimately, would I think, ultimately affect the percentage you get of the remaining assets.
So if he's not paying the mortgage but spending it all on something else, then that may help.
Yeah.
That may be a percentage towards you. Okay.
So there was that Gollings and Scott case. I think that was the one where he bought an $8,000 engagement ring for his girlfriend, and the wife was in all sorts of trouble trying to keep things afloat. I can understand why they went to court over it, but the court said, look, he's bought that out of his own money post-separation. Now, they preempted, I guess, this change to legislation because that argument, he bought it with his own money post-separation, now we'll be able to transfer to she saved that from her money post-separation, that's hers. So it's going to hopefully make an impact.
So, okay, let's look at how to prove it. How do you prove it?
Wastage.
In the marriage.
Basically, it's your disclosure, isn't it? It's going to have to affect, I know, but the court's going to look at the current property pool, right? That's the first thing you do. And now because we're not allowed to put it on the wastage on the spreadsheet anymore, you're not allowed to add in your property pool list of assets, add back, $40,000 for sale of yacht. You're not allowed to do that. So you just have your normal property pool of things that exist today. But then you need to know about things like if he sold the boat and spent the money, or then was there a Facebook ad? Are there messages? Is there money going into his account or money that should have gone into the account? Or was the ad in a brokerage, or is it gone now? Have you had a conversation with someone?
Okay. With proving it, basically you're saying you've got to get disclosure for the after stuff or find an ad and say, we had this asset and then all of a sudden they've sold it, the money went into their bank account and then it's just been spent on crap.
Yep.
So that's your proof.
Or that you might have a photo of it from when you were together and say, it's no longer on the balance sheet. I can only assume it's been sold. And it was worth roughly this, but it never went into any of his bank accounts. He's never disclosed the sale. Therefore, ask the court to accept that.
Okay. What about gambling and stuff like that? How do you prove that?
It's easier than you'd think because people have patterns. So often it'll be they'll withdraw cash from somewhere innocuous, like at a grocery store or whatever, but it'll be usually on a regular basis if they're very addicted. Sometimes they get cash out at the actual casino. Again, if they don't disclose any profits or any good results, then, they're wasting the money during the marriage.
Do people use private eyes?
Yeah. Look, I've used them in the past, but mostly things like proving where someone lives when they're saying that they're out of the country and stuff like that, or their behaviour, like with what they do with their kids or something. But that was years ago. I don't think we need it as much now because we've got Facebook, because we've got texts and so forth. But they do. If there was a boat, for instance, you've got a photo of it, put that in your affidavit and say, it was in his possession when I left. He's made no disclosure about it. I don't know where it is, and it's not on the balance sheet. But if it were sold, I would have estimated he would have got about $40,000, $50,000.
Okay. And then the other thing that people worry about is when their ex just spends all their money. So it's a joint property pool, like they've got a joint account, and then all of a sudden the ex goes on a trip to Bali or like overseas and spends all this whining and dining, like you've talked about that other case, their new partner. How do you prove that?
Well, usually that will be bank statements. And if it's a joint account, you've got access to it. The biggest target of that sort of thing, those shenanigans, is the mortgage offset account. And people will use that relentlessly to get it down to zero sometimes. But because you've got, it's awful because, or otherwise they won't pay the mortgage, even though they've got the income to do so. And they let the offset account drain away.
Is that considered wasting?
It can be, especially if they've got a salary to live on themselves. If you could say,
I think that's what one of the listener question was kind of implying. Like they were spending all their income, but not putting any, and that was just the offset account that was paying the mortgage. So that could be considered wastage.
Yeah, I would think so. I think you could make a really good argument that someone on, say, $130,000 a year with their rent is this, and also you'd be looking at their financial statement and say, look, they've had some extravagances. She didn't put in for the mortgage, but look at this, nails, holidays, credit card debt, all of that sort of stuff. Or they might have paid off their credit card. Some people think they're being very strategic with where they channel their income during and after the marriage, but the court has the power to sort of scrape all that aside.
Okay, so that's proving it. How do you tell your lawyer? Because I think there may be some lawyers that might not be up on this, and we're going to talk about the case in a minute, but how do you tell your lawyer, I think we should be focusing on wastage?
Not like that. Not like that. Yeah.
That will upset.
Good morning, Mr. Such and Such. I've been reading some recent cases and listening to the Divorce Course podcast, and
Don't mention us.
Yes, you can. And I know that this is a thing. And so I've done some work. Here's the notes. Here's the chronology. Here's my proof. Will you please make sure that gets addressed in correspondence and is ready for my affidavit?
Okay. You mentioned chronology, so we didn't touch on that.
No, we
That's
didn't.
part of the proof.
Yeah, it is.
So you can do your chronology, and we are talking about that in the webinar this week.
Yes.
If you want to come to our webinars, you can jump on the webinar, come along. We've got one tomorrow. The next day we do it the whole week, where we talk about 5 mistakes people make, and we do talk about chronology. So if you're interested in figuring out how to do one of those, come along to the webinar, go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and click ready.
With chronologies, the nice thing about it is you can have the main chronology where the life events happen, for instance. You can put everything in there, including spending of money and when money went missing and all of that. But you can also do, after you've done your main one, you could do a chronology about the events relating to money that's gone missing. Just do a precise chronology like that. Or if you're doing children's matters, you could do a chronology about the children's visitations and what's happened when. So a chronology is a lot more complicated than just a timeline of one thing.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. How do you bring it up in mediation? A couple of people we know, we know a lot of people who do our course, they go to their mediations without a lawyer. How do you bring it up in mediation to be like, by the way, you're wasting all our money, you dope, and I want a larger percentage of the property pool because of it. So how do you do?
You're invited to our free webinar. Whether you're stuck at the beginning of deciding to divorce or you're struggling to find your way through the legal jargon and fear of the unknown of the legal process, we are here to empower you to take control. Join us to learn what steps you can take, followed by a live Q&A where you get Lynn, my amazing mum, and family law accredited specialist to answer your question. All you have to do is go to www.thedivorcecourse.com.au and click on Reserve My Seat. We'll see you there. Hurry, spaces are limited, so don't miss out. Register today.
Well, we know a lot of people who do our course, they go to their mediations without a lawyer. How do you bring it up in mediation to be like, by the way, you're wasting all our money, you dope, and I want a larger percentage of the property pool because of it. So how do you do that?
Good morning, Mr. Mediator, Mrs. Mediator. I'm aware that wastage is now referred to a part of Section 79(5) of the Family Law Act. And after this recent case of Shinohara, I have prepared a chronology about the finances and a statement of what I think has happened with money that needs to be added back. I've got a copy for you and I've got a copy for them. And so that's why I'm asking for X amount of dollars in my property settlement.
A larger percentage in my property settlement.
No, you might have worked it out.
Yeah.
I'm totally. I'm wanting $800,000 out of my property settlement because of this $100,000. So you just explain your position. I think there's a lot to be said for putting things in writing, because the mediator, instead of going, they're hard to prove, and you've got, no, this is what I say, and here's the proof. The mediator goes into their room and says, your ex is claiming this, and here, I've got a copy for you. What do you say about that? And it really just front and centres it. And the other person knows that if you have to go to court, you're ready.
Because that'll be an affidavit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're saying if there's wastage, anyone listening today, if you've got wastage, then have the chronology of how they wasted it, where they wasted it, have the documented proof if you can. I know disclosure is painful for a lot of people. If you are struggling with disclosure, go and listen to our DIY disclosure episodes so that you can get yourself through it. But if you've got that printed document with you, one for them, one for you, one for the mediator, that's how you bring it up in mediation.
Yes.
What do you do if a lawyer says, oh, no, that's just an add back, and they try and put it on the property sheet?
There's this case.
Dear Mr. Lawyer,
I mean,
have you heard of the case?
See, the thing is, if you're in mediation and adding it back into the property pool gives you a better outcome, you might not say anything much at all. It's up to them to look out for themselves, but you won't get away with that in a court, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, and I have had some emails recently of people who've gone to mediation, and they do it with people who aren't lawyers, right? The mediator is like maybe one of the, the helping services. They don't understand the changes in the law. They don't understand any of that. And I do feel sometimes these extra percentages that people should be getting, like for family violence, for wastage, these other things that the percentage should be pushed for, they're getting pushed away. The mediator's like, let's not talk about that. Let's just focus on the facts or whatever. So there is a concern, I think, for me, for people going for property mediation with mediators that aren't legally in the know.
Too right.
Where they can get pushed.
Yeah.
They can get pushed into making an agreement that's not fair. Because if you do go to court, that is exactly what they're going to be looking at, the percentages for those things, potentially. So I just think it's mindful for everybody to just be aware that just because you go to a mediation with a mediator doesn't mean they know the law. Unless it's a court-appointed mediator where it's a judge or someone who does know the law, just be mindful of that their aim is to get you guys to get to an agreement. Their aim might not be to get the legal, fair agreement.
I agree, Rose. I don't think, I'll just say it, I don't think non-lawyers and particularly non-family lawyers should be doing property mediations, because where there's an imbalance of power, stand by.
Cue the hate mail. The hate emails.
I know, but honestly.
But it's important.
Yes.
I care about our listeners.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't care about the mediators. I care about our listeners. And I'm sick and tired of hearing them being duped, bullied, pushed, and coerced into signing these things that aren't fair.
Yeah.
And then they listen to our episodes and go, oh, what have I done? Or they see a lawyer and they go, wait, I got swindled. I mean, I'm not saying these mediators are swindling.
They're not nasty.
No. They just don't know. Yep. They just don't know. And especially with these new changes.
That's right. And you'll be like a voice in the wilderness all by yourself. You know the law. You tell the mediator, they say, well, I don't know, ask the other lawyer, they're going to deny it. The client's going to deny it. And then you're really being pushed against it. That's why I like you to do a little bit of prep work before you go. And if you haven't got actual numbers, put an E in front and have an estimate. And if you've got it in writing and you've got several copies, I think just putting it in writing and having these pieces of paper that no one can ignore, and if you put on the tables and put the cases in it, then it kind of starts your conversation on the right foot.
Well, let's talk about this. So it's a new case, Shinohara and Shinohara.
Yes.
And Mum, that's 2025.
Yep.
So it was produced on the 23rd of July, 2025. So it was pretty much a month after the changes.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that case and what people need to know and why they would be printing it out and putting it with their wastage
Absolutely,
documents?
Yes. So in spite of its weird name, it's a very important case and it is a game changer, I think. It's the first case to go to the full court that I'm aware of post the amendments to the Act that talked about wastage and stuff in June of this year. So this is a month after. And what the court has, it's the full court, reasonably strong full court, 3 judges. It's binding, therefore, on people down below. And what they've said is, look, this is our chance to clarify this. Let's just be clear. You don't add any wastage money back into the property pool, right? You just don't do that, okay? What you do is you ask for a bigger percentage of the assets that do exist. So that's been an absolute game changer because you just don't add it back. And the add backs, therefore, must not be in the balance sheet at all. But they go on to discuss cases in the past, and they talk about now the court has the power to adjust property, and it doesn't have the power to adjust property if there isn't property. That's the very foundation of their powers, divide property. But they think...
So in the past where we used to say, oh, well, they sold that car for $100,000, the car's gone, but put it back on the spreadsheet anyway, that doesn't happen.
No, that doesn't happen. Unless he's or she's still got $100,000 in the bank to show for it. But you would have a narrative underneath with some history talking about how that property was wasted. So you can use the word wastage. That used to be a very unusual thing to say, but now it's something the court must have a look at. It's one of the Section 79.5 things. And you just say in the narrative, look, the property pool in that case we had before is $200,000, but it was $300,000 because he sold the car, the $100,000 car for $1. Therefore, please, can I have 75% of the remaining $200,000, which oddly turns out to be $150,000, which is half. But it won't always come out like that. The court's got to look at all different sorts of things. But don't be talked out of raising your wastage because it's a percentage or two adjustment, or it might be a big adjustment to you, and it might be a shield against allegations of things you might have done. So I think you don't start making concessions before the whole sort of playing field is worked out. You don't start saying, oh, well, I won't go after that money from the boat as long as I can go 75-35 on the property pool. And they go, well, why would you get 75%? Where's your contribution? And then you've got to say, oh, but actually he had a boat. So start putting your case early on.
So what you're saying is, and I think this is important, you can use it as a shield.
Yes.
You're not necessarily, you may say, oh, there was some wastage in our relationship and there was wastage after separation, but I really don't want to bother going down that road because it's going to make things messy and I just want to get a settlement as soon as possible. But what Mum's saying is you can use it as a shield. So if they come back later in the mediation and say, you did X, Y, Z, so I get this percentage, you could go, actually, well, if we're going to go down that road, I'll bring up the wastage issue and here's my wastage argument and the percentage that you owe me. So let's agree to drop it all and then we won't have to go down that road. A lot of people want to be the good guy. They don't want to be bringing up all these extra percentage points. They don't want to be bringing up drama, but it may be a good shield. So don't feel like you're on the attack and you're the baddie. You're just having it there to help your case and your future. So, Mum, really important. People need to focus on this. If you're listening today about wastage, doesn't matter where you are in the journey, you need to be focusing on, well, number one, your separation date.
Yes.
Because that is a huge marker between wastage before and after, isn't it? There's a big difference between the two sometimes. So make sure you know what your separation date is. And we do hear of people who are separated under one roof, but they're kind of still together. It's just they're sleeping in different rooms, but that doesn't count as
sometimes it doesn't. I've recommended to people before, if you think there's any doubt about the separation date, maybe send an email, even if they're only in the next room, and say, look, I reckon we separated on this date. What do you think? If I don't hear back from you, I'll assume you agree. And then you've got yourself a little thing. And the other point, sorry to interrupt your flow, Laura, but the other point is, even though you want to be a good person, I think the facts are the facts, and you should put those facts about the wastage very early on in the negotiation. And then you can say, but for the sake of mediation, I'm not going to pursue that, right? And then that lets them know what the other person knows what their risk is if they don't negotiate. Yeah.
That's true. And we did do an episode on legal gatekeeping where, sometimes lawyers are like, let's just not raise that. That's going to get in the way of us settling. But Mum, her point is raise it. So straight away, be upfront, wastage, family violence, whatever it is. So they know that is on the negotiating table. And if mediation doesn't go to plan and you do end up in court, they know that's going to be brought up. It's not a surprise. So, Mum, I asked you before we started this episode, what do the listeners really need to be focusing on?
Yep.
And you did say separation date, super important.
Yes.
The importance of dates, if you want to go listen to an episode, I'll put that in the show notes so you guys can know, because I've heard of so many people living together under one roof with all their finances still intermingled and tangled, and then big tax debts or the wastage, and then the courts go, well, that was while you were still together. It doesn't matter. Like, there's all these implications from not getting yourself out of whatever financial hoo-ha your ex is going to be going through. You also said check superannuation. What do you mean by that?
So when you're getting your superannuation valuations, right, using a superannuation information form, it's if use both dates, the date of separation and the current date, to get two different values of superannuation. So you can see if they've been drawing out of the superannuation post-separation, or if they've been adding extra in post-separation.
And how does that affect wastage?
Well, because some people take money out of their super and blow it, right? If they reach a retirement age or they reach a hardship thing, they get the money out and disappear it, spend it on those holidays, and then suddenly there's not as much money in the property pool. Okay, that's wasted. Other things are post-separation contributions or future and current first circumstances. They might be putting extra money in their superannuation, but want to work off superannuation as at the date of separation. But by putting money in the superannuation, that might have come at the expense of them properly paying for mortgages or contributing to the children. So it's kind of handy to have the two dates.
Right. And that's why it's also not just super, but it's also important to know what was the bank accounts at the time of separation? What was the asset pool like at the date of separation? So, Mum, you think it's a good idea for anybody, wherever they are, to sit down and go, okay, on the day we separated, can you find out what the assets were? Can you find out what the super was? And keep an eye on that wastage.
And the credit card debt.
Forwards.
Yep. Credit card debt as well, if that's gone up or if it's all been paid off. So those current and future circumstances will have an impact as well. Yes.
Well, I hope that makes it clearer for some people. I know that if you're listening to this episode, obviously your ex has been wasting money and that must suck and make your heart go a million miles an hour. One thing I can say is the sooner you get property settlement, the better. The sooner you get out of this joint situation with them, the better. Sometimes when it comes to disclosure and things like that, it is a hard slog. But, Mum, do you have anything that we could embroider on a cushion?
I think the delay in disclosure is sometimes giving the person an opportunity. This is not for the cushion. It's giving the person an opportunity to hide the assets. Okay? So if they go slow, you need to go to court.
Oh, if they go slow, you need to go. But is there any, when it comes to wastage, Mum, just quickly, is there anything with high conflict that people need to be aware of?
Look, yes, that you're naming it. They may refute that and argue it and say it doesn't really happen, but you've got your proof and you've got your suspicions. You be open, though, if they say, no, this is what happened, I actually paid it off the credit card debt or whatever. So be open to the changes. But high conflict, yes, I can see why you wouldn't want to name it early on, but actually they just need to know that it's happened.
You're going to,
and you're asking for the disclosure on it, and they need to provide it. Yeah.
Okay. Manipulative and controlling when it comes to wastage.
That's where that cushion comes in handy. Yeah. If they're stalling, they may be blowing all of the money, or like you imagine if you end up in mediation and have a property settlement 6 months after separation, for instance, it'd be very hard to spend $200,000 in 6 months without it turning up as something. I think there was a movie called Brewster's Millions where the guy had won $1 million. Remember that? And he had to spend it all. And it's almost impossible. It normally will be somewhere and you can identify, oh, it's that boat or that airplane or it's in that account. However, if you leave it a few years, they can very easily hide quite a lot of money. And I think we're going to see a bit of a spate of people going to court and go, well, there's no assets, Your Honour. What are you going to divide? What are you going to do? And wouldn't it be awful if you had to discontinue because suddenly there were no assets?
So that is the manipulative, controlling, narcissistic tact that's going to happen from these changes, is they're just going to try really hard to slow everything down, hide all the money, and then say there's no assets because the court's saying we only can deal with property that exists. So
they'll also
be mindful. If they go slow, it's probably time to go.
And they'll also, I think, a manipulative and controlling person may also turn it around on you and go, well, what about the money you spent on quilting? Or what about those trips you had away with the girls? Yeah, labubis. Yeah. It's like, what aboutism? And you'll get that, I think, as well.
And they will try and make you be chasing your tail to try and prove what, their lies. And then it distracts you from paying attention to what they're actually doing. So be mindful of
which
that.
Also distracts you from the final outcome of the case, which you should keep your mind laser focused on getting out.
True. Avoidant when it comes to wastage, Mum?
Yeah, avoidant people, I think it's really that they just don't want to do the work to show you. I can't see that there's, like, if they're completely avoidant, I don't see them as doing sneaky things behind the scenes, but they may be very slow at producing stuff. I think just keep your deadlines on that one and say, look, unless I get these documents, I'm going to have to go to court. I don't want to have to go to court. Can you just do it? This is how you'd get them. You go into the bank, you ask for this, or you log on here. Yeah, just try and make it easier for them to do the right thing.
And then an avoidant may not want to deal with financial troubles. That is a thing. I have tax debt.
Absolutely.
I've heard of exes who haven't rung the ATO and they haven't paid their taxes in 5 years. Their ex is going, what are you doing? Why have you not sorted this out? So if you've got an avoidant that way, is there any tips?
Yeah, they'll hide that from you as well because they're just sticking their heads in the sand. I guess the tips for that is to kind of shine a light on it. It is what it is. If the tax returns haven't been filed during your time together, the tax debt belongs to both of you usually. And so it's not as bad as the avoidant thinks. They just have to deal with it.
Yeah. Okay. And then lastly, we've got amicable. Is there any tips for wastage? Because people may be like, oh, if I bring up the wastage, I might stop it from being amicable.
Well, you know what I always say? It's only amicable if you can say no without derailing the whole process. Because if you can't say no, then you're probably being manipulated.
Right. So if it is truly amicable and you say, hey, let's face it, you did spend this money and it wasted it. I want a larger percentage because of that. Then they should be fine.
Yeah, and here's a case to read if you think I'm shooting for the moon, and let's work out something in the middle there so that we don't have to run up legal fees and so forth. But you're avoidant with the tax things. Sometimes we all know about body doubling, right? Sometimes an avoidant might need you to take them to the tax person and stay with them while it gets sorted. It might just be a crisis of courage, or they might be emotionally. Sometimes I say they're depressed, or you might see if their brother will go with them or their sister or someone.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mum, for explaining to us the new wastage information. Again, if you have any of these issues, go and see a lawyer. Get them to look at your individual case. Do what Mum said. Take your documents, take your proof, take your disclosure, take your chronology. Get the best use out of that time with that lawyer. And if you've got a manipulative and controlling who's dragging their feet with this sort of stuff, when it comes to wastage, Mum says if they're going slow, it's probably time to go. So get moving so that you don't end up with zero property to be arguing over in the courts. So we wish you all the best. Mum, we're going to keep you updated with any other cases that may come out with the new changes.
Right.
Thank you, Mum, and we'll see you all next week. And come along to the webinar.
Yes.
With the webinar, you can actually speak to us, like type messages to us and we'll react.
In real time.
All right. Thank you so much, Mum. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, Laura. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.